devotees, erupting enthusiasm. The enthusiasm was unbelievable. Unless you were there, you could not actually imagine how enthusiastic devotees could become as a unit, a group, loving persons. And so, but this one lecture, before Prabhupada came to the point of saying thank you very much, he asked the devotees a question, as he sometimes would. He said, "Why are you coming to hear me speak every day?" And all the devotees, they could think of a million, zillion reasons, and so they just sat there, deer in the headlights, look on their face. And he said, "And you're so enthusiastic." He said, "Every day, I'm telling you exactly the same thing. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you are his eternal servant." And basically, that's what I'm saying every day, and he did. Those of us who have taken up the sadhana of listening to Srila Prabhupada's recorded material chronologically, as a sadhana, and I've been doing this for many years. I'm on my fourth time through now. And it's so obvious that he was just on this point, that Lord Chaitanya here is speaking to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He was on it to everybody. Because without actually assimilating this, you cannot taste Krishna consciousness. You cannot even think of Krishna, but to think of taste Krishna consciousness. We'll mistake, the things that happen to us and the feelings and the sensations that we experience when the modes of nature are flowing by and flowing over us. And, we mistake that to be some elevated or non-elevated position, but in reality, we're something completely different. So that obviously the devotees couldn't answer the question. And he said, "It is because you have ruchi." And this is interesting because normally when we speak of spiritual science, the term ruchi fits in in the hierarchy of the evolution of our spiritual consciousness in a very high position. It's after nishta. You have hearing with faith, then you have association with the devotees, and then you have the awakening of the desire to serve, and then you have the initiation and the actual activation of the service and the direction of the spiritual master. And then under his direction, you learn what to do, what not to do, what to think, what not to think, what to keep in the heart, what to chuck out of the heart. And by the grace of Krishna and his energies, he's always arranging different situations for you so that you can get the point. And if you don't get the point, he'll do it again, arrange another situation, so that the point gets a little sharper and a little sharper and a little sharper until you finally get it. But here, and then after that, anartha nivritti, then you can become fixed up. Prabhupada you coined that phrase, fixed up, for the term nishta, where one's faith is fixed and one no longer doubts, and one's desire for devotional service, to please Krishna, to get out of this material world, and all the things that are connected with devotional service come out. And then ruchi. And generally it's defined ruchi as the kind of taste that is so extraordinary that the mind cannot resist going to the sound of Krishna, Krishna's name, the philosophy that describes Krishna, the philosophy Krishna is describing, pastimes of Krishna, everything connected with Krishna. When one has ruchi, then one's mind goes there immediately. One is not distracted. So Prabhupada would use this term under that, in this condition, under this circumstance, was unusual and was interesting. to me. So I started to think about it, and I realized that this idea that the devotees were hearing about Krishna, the same thing, day in, day out, day in, and yet very enthusiastic at the end of the lecture. Of course, from our side, we know that because Srila Prabhupada was giving the lecture, and because the sound of his voice and his presence and just his darshan was so enlivening in itself, you know, for many of us, it wouldn't make much difference what came out of his mouth. We were just so happy, you know, to be with him, to be with a person who was actually in love with Krishna. Takes one to know one. So the point is that we can evaluate our advancement in devotional life by the conviction that we have about who we are. This is the point that's being made here by Lord Chaitanya to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The living entity, this living entity covered by the influence of nations, exists in different forms in the material condition, O king. He is thus proportionally freed from the influence of material nature to a greater, lesser degree. So in everything in our lives, there's a spectrum. Nothing is ever black and white. Those who try to make conclusions black and white, or draw lines in between people, black and white, they end up fighting with one another and killing one another eventually at the extreme end of the spectrum. And this is going on today in the name of, even in the name of religion, it's going on. Krishna has a different approach. You may remember in the Gita, Dumanavriya Vanya, Ita Dasha Malinacha, it told vid agato gardas, Tata Tenam Agritam. Here Krishna is discussing the covering, the way the soul is covered in the material world. And it's the same point that's being made here. Dumanavriya Vanya. Some souls are covered to the extent that you can see the effect of the soul, you can see the consciousness, but little spark. And some are covered to a greater extent. Do we have a Gita? I'd like to read the verse directly. I can paraphrase it, but it's always nice to hear Prabhupada's translations direct. Yeah. 3rd chapter. It comes right after that verse, that famous verse, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajo Guna Samudbhava, Mahashano Mahapapma, Vidyena Midivaya.